Back by popular demand for our wonderful dog behavior conference is Zazie Todd. Now, Zazie, you spoke at the conference a couple of years ago. I think it was just when your book WAG, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy, came out, which I see that you've got behind you. And yeah, it was had a great response. People loved you, and so I'm very excited that you're coming back again. But tell everybody what you're going to talk about, because I think this is one of the most important topics that we're going to cover in this conference.
Thank you. So I'm talking about fearful dogs and how we can help them. This is a topic that's close to my heart. I've had my own fearful dogs. I've worked with tons of fearful dogs, and it can be a real challenge for people sometimes. And a very fearful dog, I mean, it ranges. You get the very fearful dogs that when you bring them home, they are too terrified to do anything. They're just cowering in a corner of the room or hiding behind the sofa. And then you get those dogs that are just fearful at certain times, like when they hear fireworks, for example, or when they have to go to the vet. So I'm speaking to all of those different types of fears and the things that cause those fears, so to help us to understand it, but also all of the things that we can do to help fearful dogs. And I'm especially going to be talking about a technique called counter conditioning, because it's a very powerful technique. It helps make a huge difference. This is how we change dogs' emotions to help them learn to love the thing that they were previously afraid of. And there are a few techie things that you need to know to get it right, but the talk is not too techie at all. I break it all down and make it really simple to help people understand how they can help fearful dogs. So I think it's a really important topic, and I hope people will want to come and listen, and definitely they'll take lots of tips away.
Yeah, I love that, because you do give practical tips. And of course, guys, if you haven't registered for the Dog Behavior Conference yet, do it now. It's April the 1st to the 3rd. It is a virtual conference, so it doesn't matter where in the world you are. Join us. You can join us live. If not, you'll have access to the presentations for 12 months after they air live. And of course, Zazie will be one of some of our great presenters that we have scheduled for this year, 2022. Tell people a little bit about yourself, Zazie, because I first heard about you through companion animal psychology, which I love. Can you tell people about that?
Thank you. And can you believe it? Companion animal psychology is actually coming up to 10 years. Just before this conference, it will be 10 years old, which is amazing. So I started companion animal psychology back in 2012 because my own background is in psychology, human psychology, and I had just got two dogs fairly recently. And I was really intrigued by the fact that, not just intrigued, but I'll say intrigued, also annoyed by the fact that so many things I read about dogs or saw on TV were not correct. And, different myths that people have about dogs, and it just did not fit with my psychology background and what I'd learned about it. And obviously there were some people who were doing amazing work with dogs, including yourself, who I always love to watch and always have loved to watch. But there are various different people who have these myths about dogs that they've continued to spread. Unfortunately, they're not as prevalent now as they were. But I turned to the science to find out, what we really know. And the brilliant thing is that canine science was just really taking off. And these days there is so much science about dogs, and it's so fascinating, and it's so relevant to our everyday lives with dogs. And I think it's brilliant. And back when I was a human psychologist, psychologists were not interested in dogs at all. So it's been a big change, I think, for people to be so interested in dogs. So that's when I started companion animal psychology. My PhD is in psychology. I studied with Jean Donaldson at the Academy for Dog Trainers. I also love cats. I've always been a cat person, and I have a advanced certificate in feline behavior from International Cat Care as well. So I do work with people with dogs and cats, but I also write, and I love writing. So I've been writing companion animal psychology for all this time, sharing information about dogs and cats, what we know, evidence-based things that we can do to help our dogs and cats live a happier life. And I think it's really important. And I think that's why we get pets, because we want them to be happy and to have a nice companionable life with us. So I love sharing that kind of information with people.
And you share it beautifully in WAG, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy, because it really does. And again, I think the beauty of how you do it is you make it relatable. So it doesn't matter where people are in their dog professional journey, if they are a animal care professional or if they're just a dog lover. You make it accessible to everybody. So, and that's what I really love about your presentations, and also about your writing as well. And I think I first saw you on Twitter and I was like, who is this person? This person's amazing. And then of course, now fast forward to this. Talking about fear in dogs, can we explore that a little bit more? Because I think it's sort of misunderstood that, fear, when you talk about fear, it's kind of like the F word. It's really negative. But actually, if we could start off with this, that actually fear is adaptive, isn't it? Fear keeps us safe. In a weird way, it does. It keeps us safe because, for example, if you weren't taught as a child, roads are dangerous. Roads with cars are dangerous. You have to look both ways in order to cross the road safely. If you don't do it, you could lose your life. We're taught that from a very early age. We're taught to fear crossing roads, or at least to be careful. And of course, if we weren't, we would just cross the road and probably get run over. So fear is adaptive, isn't it? Why dogs need it? So what's bad about it?
Absolutely, it is adaptive. And that's a lovely example that if we weren't afraid of some things, we would go and run in front of cars or, touch the stove when it's hot and things like that. And we would have lots of very bad experiences. So it protects us from a lot of things and it helps us to learn when things aren't safe. So some fear is a good thing, absolutely. But sometimes dogs and people can be too fearful, or they might be fearful in situations where they don't need to be. And I think fireworks is a good example of that, because we know fireworks are just for fun, but we can't explain that to our dogs. And they're just hearing these big, loud noises. And if they haven't been exposed to them in a positive way as puppies, then this can actually be a very frightening experience for them. And there's a lot that we can do to help prevent unnecessary fears in dogs. And a lot of that relates to when they're puppies and that important period between 3 and about 12 to 14 weeks, when puppies need lots of positive experiences of a wide variety of different kinds to help them know what they're going to experience in the world in future. And if they don't have that when they come across those things, it can actually be quite frightening for them.
So let's say if you have one of those dogs that has maybe potentially now become really fearful of noise, fearful of these fireworks, what does it feel like to these dogs?
I mean, I think it's terrifying. It's obviously hard for us to put ourselves in the mind of a dog, but you can imagine that they might feel as if, the world is ending. They don't know what's going to happen. And maybe they're also linking it with other fearful noises like thunder, which they may also find quite frightening. But I think one important thing for the dog's guardian to know is it's not their fault if their dog is fearful, because there are so many different things that can contribute to to causing fear. Even if you have done a wonderful, wonderful job of socializing your puppy, they may still become fearful later on, and I think it's important for people to realize that, because it's very easy to blame ourselves for having done something wrong or to blame something that's happened to the dog. And it's not necessarily that. I mean, obviously, if we don't socialize them well enough, it's not good for them. We do need to do a good job of that. But at the same time, genetics plays a role. So if the parents are fearful dogs, for example, and also the experiences of the mother, if the mother dog is stressed, then that can make the dog more likely to be anxious and stressed and fearful later on. Those early experiences are important, but bad experiences matter as well. If something bad happens in the dog's life that we can't prevent, that may cause fear. Now, all of these different things, and also medical issues may play a role in it too. One thing that I only learned relatively recently, which came out of some research from the University of Lincoln, is that when dogs become afraid of fireworks later in life, sometimes that can be because of a medical issue and because of pain. So now when I hear about that, I always know, okay, I should be thinking this dog needs to see the vet. And actually this applies to my own dog too, because when my own dog started being a bit more fearful, and he's a senior, I thought, he needs to go to the vet and see what's going on there. So pain meds might be part of it. And I'm not a vet. I hasten to say I'm not a vet at all. This is just some really interesting things that I've read about, but we have to be able to work with our colleagues in this professional space. And I think it's important to know that.
I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. If you think about maybe from your own, for a personal experience, I'm quite photosensitive. I'm quite light sensitive, and I'm light sensitive because of headaches. And sometimes the color, if you've got a vibrant color blue, for example, on a screen, and on a video screen or a computer screen or something, that can just make me go like that. And that because it's linked to pain, right? And if you get, I fortunately don't get a lot of bad migraines or migraines. I don't, but certainly the occasional one. And so that's left me quite photosensitive. So it stands to reason that when you've got an older dog, and I've heard of dogs that actually even younger that have become very sound sensitive, because actually that pain increases your sensitivities to so many different things, including sights, sounds, smells even, but definitely sights and sounds.
Yes, and I think that's a lovely example. And I'm sorry you get all those migraines, but I think it helps people to understand, when they can think about it from their own perspective, then it makes sense to them. It's one of those things that once you know it, then it makes a lot of sense, and you know to act on it. And it's another one of those things that tells us that we shouldn't blame ourselves if our dog is fearful. Obviously, we need to do what we can to help the dog not be afraid, but there's not helpful to blame ourselves, even though it's so easy to think it must be our fault and get stressed about it.
Yeah. I when I first started It's Me or the Dog, we were very much like, it was very much in the time a la Super Nanny, where you're like, bad owner, bad person, why are you doing that? Naughty. And it truly isn't. You're not going to get buy-in if you belittle somebody or make them feel bad about maybe the decisions they've made or the decisions they haven't made, or the fact that they didn't know, or the fact that there's nothing that they can do about it. Yet, we've come so far, not just the way that we teach dogs, but the way that we treat people as well. And I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's not the fault of the person at all. And even if it is, it's because, there's a reason why there are experts out there, and dog guardians, most of them aren't experts. We are the ones that can come in and give them information about their dog so we can come and help them. Have you seen a change in the way that people have, or maybe even in yourself, but the way that people have, or trainers, professionals have been teaching people?
Yes, I think so. I think people are being more positive and thinking more about the human side of things, and what it feels like for the owner and how to help the owner. And at the same time, I think dog guardians are feeling more willing to get help and understanding that they're not the experts. They might be the expert on their own dog in many ways, their dog's favorite games and things like that, but they're not fully experts on dog behavior. And I think because we've grown up with knowing dogs and things about dogs, I think everyone comes into adulthood thinking they already know a lot about dogs and how to care for them. But there's been so much education and help from people, and your own shows and books and so on, and lots of different people working together to get the message across that actually there's a lot more to dogs than that. And so I think more people are aware of that, and they're willing to go and seek help. And I think that's fantastic. And I think also people understand more about how to teach people. We're learning more about how to teach people how to interact with their dog and to train their dog. And the human side of things is so important.
How has your human psychology background, how has it contributed to the way that you work with people?
I think it makes a huge difference. And some of what I used to do was actually to do with the psychology of how we communicate about risk. And so all of those communication things were to partly to do with countering misinformation as well. So I use that all of the time. When I'm writing on my blog, I use that all of the time because I'm thinking about what's the best way to get a message across so that people will be able to understand it. And that's why I like writing so much as well as working with people. And I've always done a lot of teaching even before I became interested in dogs and started working with dogs. And so I think I bring that as well, that kind of perspective of helping people to understand and helping people to be active in their own learning and supporting them to feel comfortable and confident as well. Being kind to people, I think it's important. Yeah, and really. I know it's something you say a lot about as well, being kind and how important kindness is.
Yeah, it really is. It's so important. It's the secret sauce. It really is. You don't belittle, because they're the most important trainer in the dog's life, not you. I always say that, I always say that to my students as well. Can we talk a little bit about the link between fear and aggressive behavior?
Yeah, and I think it's something people often don't understand, because if they feel that if a dog's being aggressive, the dog is being bad, but actually often the dog is afraid or even very afraid. And it's really important to recognize those early signs of fear and be able to think, okay, what can I do about this to make the dog feel more comfortable, rather than to tell them off. So, for example, not to punish a growl. Some people, unfortunately, feel that they have to tell a dog off for growling, but that growl is really important information that the dog is uncomfortable. And learning to recognize that and all the different body language signs can help you realize when the dog is feeling fearful and you can do something about it. Because if you don't, then unfortunately, if these things keep happening to the dog, they may end up in a situation where they feel that they have to kind of ramp things up and be more aggressive to get you to back away. And that's never a good situation for anyone. You want to dial things down much sooner. And some of those early signs, I think, are actually things that people aren't so good at recognizing. We have to teach people to recognize them, because it might be as simple as the dog looking away or licking their lips or, just having a lower posture. Whereas, for example, a tucked tail is something that everybody knows to look for. There are some signals that lots of people pick up on, and there are some of those more subtle ones. It might even just be going and sniffing at something, and that might be a displacement behavior, because what's happening over here is actually a bit scary and nerve-wracking for them. So they're pretending that, none of that is going on. I'm just sniffing this interesting thing over here. And that's kind of anthropomorphizing a bit, but it's to help people to understand that these early signs of things that we should be recognizing. And unfortunately, once you do learn to recognize them, social media becomes much more difficult, because you see all these videos of sad, distressed dogs that people think are funny, and it's awful. But
It's terrible. Oh my gosh, the amount. You just have to Google, and Rottweilers, I love them. I love the breed, but you Google Rottweilers and babies, and there are a gazillion films on YouTube, videos on YouTube of babies riding Rottweilers and German Shepherds and pulling down the Dachshund's lip and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, no, that's just the worst thing ever when you see that kind of thing. I think it really does. I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking exactly that. I was like, oh my gosh, the YouTube, people just not understanding dog body language. And yet when you do, and you do watch those things, you go, oh my goodness, even posting a photograph. I saw one of a good friend of mine who posted a picture of his granddaughter, I think it was, and going to kiss the lab's face. It was this lab is the most gorgeous thing in the world, but still, the photo looks beautiful and had a gazillion likes, and everybody thought and you're going, oh my gosh, please. What can we do about that?
It's almost as if you want to tell people that if you think the video is cute, you should go look at it again and look really carefully at the body language and think maybe it's not actually cute, because I think it takes a long time to teach people this kind of information. And there's even some research that shows that when it comes to interactions between dogs and children, actually dog guardians are more likely to make mistakes in interpreting the dog's body language. And I think that's kind of a psychological thing, probably. Of feeling that they know the dog and they know dogs, so it must be safe. And I think we just it's very easy to fall into that trap and not actually pay attention. And again, once you're thinking, oh no, this is terrible. So anytime you think something is really cute, it's a sad thing to say, but maybe just take an extra careful look at the dog's body language and see what you can learn.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about displacement behaviors, you see it. You see the dog kind of going away and sniffing, or or scratching, or trying to become interested in something else, and because they're feeling uncomfortable. And and you were saying about anthropomorphizing, but I mean, yes, because humans do displacement behaviors themselves. I have this displacement behavior that I do with my hair.
I think so many people do that. I do that
I just do that all the time. It's a displacement behavior. But I'm not necessarily, when I'm doing that, I'm not necessarily always fearful. I'm maybe I could be bored. Maybe I need a little bit more enrichment. So I do that. But I definitely do know that sometimes I do that as well when I'm just feeling uncomfortable. So I think displacement behaviors are fascinating, and we need to pay more attention to them.
They really are. And the other thing is that as dog guardians, we need to learn to advocate for our dogs. So first of all, we have to spot these behaviors. And then once we have done, we have to advocate for our dog. And sometimes that can feel quite hard because you have a stranger coming in wanting to pet your dog. You know, I'm a real dog lover. Can I say hi to your dog? And sometimes you have to say, no, my dog wouldn't like that. And that can feel quite difficult. So you have to learn to be able to do that, and to stand up for your dog and advocate for them in a nice, positive, friendly way, but in order to actually keep people away. And sometimes that can feel quite hard. But it's your job as the dog's guardian to do that.
Well, I have two now small dogs. I used to have my beloved Sadie, and she passed away 4 years ago. Last week, which I can't believe it's been 4 years. But now I have two little ones. And of course, lots of people, because Sadie was a chocolate lab, wanted to go up and say hello to her. And she was, as you know, safe as safe could be for a dog. But my Chihuahua Jasmine wasn't. And of course, Jasmine, because she's little and attracts all the little kids, want to go up and touch her. I'm like, nope, because she came to me when she was 6 months old. When you're talking about a fearful dog, she was a fearful dog. And even though she's come so far, she still doesn't like little children coming into her space before she gets to know them. When she gets to know them, she's okay, but she doesn't like it. So I would say, I'm afraid she doesn't like, I would never say to a child she doesn't like children. I would just say, oh, she's a bit scared of people. So so she doesn't like to be touched. And most of these kids were like, okay, pretty good about it. But because she was small, they wanted to go ahead and touch her. And you're right. And you got to advocate, even though that might offend somebody. If it does offend somebody, well, too bad.
Well, yes, because it's your dog. You have to look after your dog. And don't you think people act differently with small dogs as well? Like,
yes.
I have a small dog now. I have a Shih Tzu now. He's a senior. We adopted him a year ago. And compared to having big dogs like I had before, you know, some of the big dogs people actually would steer quite far from. You know, they weren't necessary. I mean, they were lovely dogs, and they both actually were very friendly to people, but some people would be nervous of them, whereas with a little dog, people seem to feel much more like they can just reach out and touch. You know.
It's just not good.
No, so I think with a small dog, maybe you have to advocate a bit more, because with a big dog, people will say, okay, it's a big dog. Yes, I'll back off. With a little dog, they're just expecting that they can scoop this dog up or pet this dog, and the dog isn't going to mind. And I'm lucky because Pepper doesn't mind at all. He loves everybody, which is good. And he loves cats as well. And he loves little dogs, but not big dogs. So if it's big dogs wanting to say hello, I have to say, no, actually, he wouldn't like that, because if he's at a distance, he's fine. But for them to actually come up and get in his space, he doesn't like that. And he'll start barking and going off at them to tell them to get away.
And, you know, when we're talking about, going back to the beginning, when I said that fear is adaptive, when you see that behavior of an otherwise, you know, very friendly dog, because he likes to say hello, but there's just some things that's just too much, too overwhelming, can't cope with, and then you're going to see a response. That's adaptive behavior, but we shouldn't be telling him off for that.
No, absolutely.
Because he's basically saying, oh, no, enough, get away. Because surely we have to allow them to be able to respond to how they feel inside.
Yes, and I think this has been one of the big shifts in terms of how we think about dogs that's been so positive for dogs, because increasingly people are understanding that their dog does have opinions and is allowed to have opinions, and we have to respect those opinions as well. You know, they're not just there for us to do things to. We have to help the dog see what they need, look after them, and respect those opinions when they have them. Definitely.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I love that. I love because we talk about choice, we talk about certain amount of autonomy, but yeah, I love that. Dogs have opinions too. Let's listen to them. And they're not just there to serve us. And then also this sort of positive, even in the sort of positive reinforcement camp or the positive training camp, that we can actually be ruling our dogs' lives maybe just as much in a less painful way, but just as much as maybe the other camp of more of harder trainers, in that everything is kind of exists on a I say you do relationship, and if you do, I'll give you this. That's important in some learning environments, but we're kind of moving away from that.
Yes, I think we're giving dogs more choices. And so it's encouraged them. I will give you this treat if you do this behavior, but it's from a perspective of thinking about what's good for the dog and giving them those choices. And if they actually don't want to, well, we let them not wander off or whatever. And we have to think of how to engage them in that training session and actually motivate them. But yeah, and choice is important, because if dogs don't have choices, if we don't have choices, it's actually very stressful, you know. And for dogs, we decide almost everything in their lives. So we do need to give them choices, and it's good for their welfare if we give them those choices that we're able to. Obviously, sometimes we can't give them choices. We have to take them to the vet, whether they like it or not, for example. We just have to do that in as positive a way as we can. But, you know, when we can give them choices, which way to go on a walk, do they want to say hello to someone? Which toy do they want to play with? What kinds of games do they want to play with? Do they like going to classes or not? If they do, then can we give them that choice more often? That kind of thing. It's good for their welfare. Definitely
Yeah.
very good for their welfare.
And empowering as well. So, and that in itself, when you feel like you have some control over your situation, over what you can do or what you don't do, that can be empowering, and that can promote confidence, which of course can make a dog feel less fearful.
Yes, it helps them feel much safer if we give them choices and respect those choices. So, one of the most important things with a fearful dog is to help them feel safe, and choice is one of those ways that you can do that.
Yeah. And being with a little dog as well, you know, so when I walk her outside, she loved Sadie, and Sadie was a large chocolate lab. She was big, she was tall, she was chocolate lab through and through. And Jasmine absolutely loved her. She's been stepped on by some other larger dogs, so she doesn't feel comfortable around larger dogs. So I did some great teaching with her, but the one thing that I found that really worked was if there was a larger dog coming up, and both dogs are on the leash, that she looks at me. When I know when she looks at me, she wants to be picked up, and I pick her up. And I remember a trainer saying to me, well, why do you pick her up? Why don't you teach her to walk past that dog? But actually what I'm doing is I'm being an advocate for her. She's communicating with me. I don't want to be on the ground around this large dog. Please pick me up. We can't ignore that. She's a little dog. I'm going to do what I need to keep my little dog safe. And by doing that, I am empowering, I'm making her feel more confident, so that potentially the next time we walk past a larger dog, maybe she won't need to be picked up because she knows she's safe. And I think safety is one of the most important words we can use when it comes to dogs.
I agree. I think you're absolutely right. And the thing about a little dog wanting to be picked up is because you are a safe haven to her. So, she feels safe in your arms. She feels safe when she's close to you. And I think it's wonderful that you will just pick her up. And again, as you say, in the past, people have said that you shouldn't do these things. And that's completely not true. Your job is to keep your dog, as you say, safe. Yeah, so absolutely.
The last question I want to ask you then before we finish is that this which is I know a myth, but that you can reinforce fear.
Yes, I think that's one of the worst myths that's gone around about dogs that people used to say, and unfortunately sometimes do still say erroneously, that you shouldn't comfort a fearful dog. Now, it's possible that if your dog is fearful, sometimes they might not want to be comforted. Sometimes they might want to run off and hide behind the sofa or whatever, in which case you should let them. But if they want to be comforted, absolutely you should comfort them, because that's your job. That's you being a safe haven and a secure base for them. And if you don't do that, you're not protecting your relationship with them. It's kind of your job as the, their guardian and their caregiver, is that if they want comforting, you should comfort them, and you should find out why they're afraid and what you can do about it. Yeah. So I think that's an important myth that I'm really glad we don't hear as much as we used to hear.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I am too. Zazie, this is the reason why you're speaking at the Dog Behavior Conference. Folks, if you want to hear more from Zazie Todd, please register April the 1st to the 3rd, the Dog Behavior Conference. Go to dogbehaviorconference.com, register there, and it's going to be 3 days of absolutely dog geekdom. Again, if you cannot make it to all 3 days, I don't expect you to, because it's long. They're long days. You will have access to all the recordings for 12 months. Thank you so much, Zazie, for coming and talking to me, and I cannot wait to see you at the conference.
Thank you. And I'm so excited for this conference and for all of the speakers. And I know from last time, it's just going to be an amazing experience. So I can't wait. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.